Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this presentation from I&E of our CCNA Kickoff. My name is Keith Bogart, and I will be your presenter for this session. This is something we do about every month, so if you've watched one of the ones before this, pretty much going to be the same thing. But before I talk about what we're going to be discussing, just real quickly here, let me show you my contact information. So in the event that today you have any questions that are unanswered during this session, you can always reach out to me and get those questions answered. So here you can see, you can reach out to me via email. There's my email address. There's how you can reach out to me via Twitter. And there's how you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. So if you just spontaneously feel like sending me a $1 million check, or if I have some funds from an unknown relative in Nigeria that I'm supposed to be aware of, you can reach out to me right there and let me know. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what the course objectives are for today, and I can talk a little bit about what you can expect through this section. All right, so course objectives, number one, to describe the testing experience of the CCNA. So let me pause here and talk a little bit about this. So this course is really developed for those people who either are just mulling around with the idea of pursuing a CCNA. They don't really know what it's about, they don't really know what to expect, and they want to get some more information before they make that commitment to do that studying and pursue that certification. Or you've already made that decision, but you've just started out. You still are sort of getting your feet wet. You haven't really developed any study techniques. You're still a little bit unsure as far as what topics you need to know, what level of depth you need to know, what you're going to experience when you go into the testing environment, those types of things. If that describes you, you're right in the place where you need to be. That's what this course is all about. So with that in mind, what else are we going to talk about today? Well, in addition to sort of setting your expectations as to what it's going to look and feel like when you go into the testing center, I also want to talk a little bit about the studying process. What are some tips and tricks that I can give you to make your study time as efficient and effective as it can possibly be? We'll talk about that. And then, of course, I'll help you to identify some common pitfalls. What are some things that get people to go off the rails, to go off track? There's a lot of people who have the best of intentions to study for their CCNA, but you check back in with them a month later or 3 months later, and they're all like, oh, yeah, I haven't really cracked open the book in a couple of weeks. That just sort of dropped off. I just sort of lost interest, or I became overwhelmed, or whatever. So what are some things that cause that to happen, and how can you prevent that from happening to yourself? So, a couple of additional things. So this, as you can tell, is going live on YouTube right now. It is also being recorded. And like I said, this is something that we do pretty much like every 6 to 8 weeks, roughly. So if you've seen one of these shows previously, it's going to be the exact same content, maybe with a couple of minor changes, but it's basically the same thing because people are always new, always, at any given time, there's new people trying to pursue their CCNA, and so this is really for that group of people. If you want to submit a question, please feel free to do so. You can see there within YouTube Live, there's a section there over on the right where you can submit questions. Now, the way I'm going to deal with this is that it would be too hard for me to monitor those questions at the exact same time I'm going through my slide material and the websites and everything right here. So what I'm going to do is I've broken my presentation up into small little bite-sized chunks that are like, 10, 15 minutes per slice or per section. And at the end of every section, I'm going to have a Q&A time. So at that point, I will go back to YouTube and just spend a few moments sort of scrolling back up through the questions and see if there's any unanswered questions that you guys have posted. Now, one of the great things about this forum or this venue, by doing it via YouTube Live, and I've noticed this many times in the past when we've done this, there's a lot of very smart folks on the YouTube live stream with us right now. And so, feel free to submit your question at any point in time, because there's a lot of people watching right now who've already taken their CCNA and who are watching today who can help you. So if you have a question about something, feel free to post it, even if it's not during the official Q&A time, and most likely one or more of the other people who are watching will be able to answer your question as well. But I will take a few moments at the end of every section just to see if there's anything that's been unanswered. But please, I do want to emphasize that today's class is really geared towards those people I described. People who are either thinking of pursuing their CCNA routing and switching or who have just started it but don't really know what to expect. And it's questions along that line that I'm really looking to answer. So if you ask questions that are outside of that scope, like, what's the TCP port number for BGP? Or how do I get my IP phone to talk to my call manager? I'm not really going to be able to answer those. Those are sort of outside the scope of what we're trying to accomplish here today. But like I said, you can submit any question you want, and I'm sure other people will take a stab at answering whatever you have. So with that being the case, let's go ahead and go right into it now and talk about our first section, which is the testing experience. So what's this going to look like for you? So starting out, the CCNA, like many of Cisco's certifications, is a certification that can be achieved by taking more than one exam. So on the CCNA, you actually have a choice. You have a choice of taking one test or two tests. Now, not many Cisco certifications are like this. Most Cisco certifications are either or. Like, for example, some of the other CCNAs are just one exam and that's it. A lot of the other exams, like the CCNPs and the CCIEs, require you to take 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 exams and pass all of them before you actually get your certification. CCNA routing and switching, you have a choice. So the two separate tests are called the ICND-1 and the ICND-2, and I'll show you those here in just one second. So you can either take each of those separately, and clearly you would take the ICND-1 first, you would pass that, and then you would take the ICND-2, which is more in-depth, more complex topics. And once you've passed both of those, then you've officially got your CCNA. Now, for most people, that will probably be the way that you want to go. A lot of people ask me, and let me pause here, the one combined test is called the composite exam. Let me show you Cisco's website here real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. So let's just go to our good friend Google and type in Cisco CCNA. Right here under certifications, training and certifications, third link down. Scroll down a little bit here. And under associate, we're just talking today about the CCNA routing and switching. You can see there's a lot of other specialty CCNAs that are really good as well. So for routing and switching, if you scroll down, you can see these are your options right here. And so notice the or right here. So you can either take the ICND-1 and the ICND-2, or you can take this composite exam, which is the 200-125. Now the 200-125 is one exam that pulls questions from both of these. It's the same time frame. You get the same amount of time to complete it, but you get more questions thrown at you in that time. So I have a lot of people who ask me the question. They say, okay, Keith, what's the recommended approach here? What should I do? Should I take the two separate exams, or should I take the composite exam? And here's my recommendation to that. So for most people, my recommendation would be to take the two separate exams. And here's why. A lot of people studying for their CCNA, well, I wouldn't say most people, let's put it this way. If this describes you, if you're going into this with pretty much no networking knowledge whatsoever, like maybe you're making a complete career change, maybe right now you're working in marketing or sales or payroll, or you're an auto mechanic or something, and you want to get into the field of network engineering and network administration because you've heard it pays really well and it looks like it might be interesting, but you know nothing about that. Basically, as far as computers are concerned, you know how to get on your computer, browse the internet, get to your emails, and that's pretty much about it. Well, if that describes you, you definitely want to take the two separate exams, the ICND-1 and the ICND-2. Or maybe you've been working with computers for a little bit of time, but when it comes to networking, you know nothing about networking. For example, let me throw out some terms and see if any of these ring any bells. Now just listen to these words, these terms: IP addressing, Ethernet frame relay, OSPF, EIGRP, VLAN trunks. Now, if those terms I just threw out at you just went way over your head and you're thinking, wow, I have no idea what any of those things mean, definitely you want to take the 2 separate exams. Now, if you've already been working in some form or fashion in the networking industry for a while, for at least several months, if not a year or longer, and some or all of those terms I just mentioned, you actually know what they are. Maybe you don't know the details of what they are, but you know what the acronyms stand for, you know what those things do, then you might want to take a shot at the composite exam. But the composite exam, the 200-125, really is for people who've been working in the network industry for a while and they're not starting out at ground zero. Okay, so most people, my suspicion would be to take the 2 separate exams. Also, I have a lot of people ask me, well, how much time should I dedicate? You know, how long should I prepare mentally that's going to take me to do these exams? A lot of that really depends on you. It depends on, number one, how quickly you can memorize things. There's a lot of memorization in each one of these exams. How much time you can devote to each one of these exams. So let me just give you sort of a rough estimate here. If you can dedicate, let's say on the weekdays, on the working days, 2.5 to 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and on the weekends, you can dedicate between 5 and 7 hours on Saturday and Sunday. Now, if you can do that consistently, week after week after week, you should be ready to take your ICND-1 exam somewhere within probably 2 to 4 months. And that window, it just depends on, how quickly you learn, how well you are at memorizing things. So 2 to 4 months. And same thing for ICND-2. So if you can put in that amount of time, you should be able to get your CCNA within about 3/4 of a year. All right, so within somewhere between 4 and 8 months, 6 to 8 months, you should be able to get your CCNA. If you can't study that much, if you don't have that much time, it's just going to make it go that much longer for you. But that's sort of a rough estimate. A lot of people say, and I agree with this, 2 to 3 months per exam for ICND-1 and ICND-2. All right, so that is, now while I'm here, also I want to show you, once you've decided this, how do you register for one of these exams? Okay, and this is sort of jumping ahead a little bit, but let's talk about this right now. So let me go back to our screen here. So let's say I want to register for the ICND-1 exam. So I would click on that. And we're going to go through all this here in just a second. But notice up in the upper right corner here, it says register at Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE is the authorized testing center that Cisco has contracted to do all of their exams. And Pearson VUE has testing centers all over the world. They have thousands of them all over the world. So there's probably a testing center within an hour's drive of where you live, if not less. So you're going to go to the Pearson VUE website. Just click on that. You're going to sign in or create an account. I'm going to go ahead and sign in right here. Creating an account's pretty easy. Hopefully I remember my credentials. Okay, good. All right, and once you are signed in here, let me go ahead and make this a little bit larger for you. What we're talking about here is proctored exams. So a proctored exam means an exam where you have to go to a testing center, use their equipment to take the exam. They've got video cameras on the ceilings, monitoring people to make sure they don't cheat. And that's what they mean by a proctored exam. And so that's what all these Cisco exams are. They are proctored exams. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. Find an exam. All right, well, I know the exam I'm interested in is the ICND-1, which is the 100-105. And you can see right here, this first one is just for registering for the exam itself. And we'll see that in just a second. These other 2 things here, which are going to be more pricey, they're going to cost you more, are not only letting you register for the exam, but it's also giving you either 30 days or 180 days access to like some online practice tests, some Cisco learning labs. But right now, let's just focus on registering just for the exam itself. So I'm going to click on that, click go, and you can see here, I get to choose which language I want. So I'll do English. Next. All right, so you can see the ICND 1 and the ICND 2, they are both 165 US dollars each. Now here's another question that sometimes people give me. They say, okay, well, would I save money by taking the one composite exam instead of the two separate exams? Would it be cheaper for me? The answer is yes, by $5. It's negligible. So 165 times 2, what does that give you? That gives you $330, right? $330 if I'm doing my math right to take the two separate exams. I believe the composite exam is like $320 or $325. It's so minimal. So you're not really going to save any money by taking the composite exam. So that should not be a factor in your decision. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click right here, schedule the exam. Right here, I'm basically saying, yes, I promise not to cheat. I promise not to tell anybody the questions that I saw on the exam. Next. All right, so now here is where you would put in your address of where you live or where you work. And then down here, once you put in your address, it'll show you the various testing centers that are close to your location. So let me just do this first one here on Quaid Drive. I'll click that. I'll click Next. And now it shows me the dates and times as far as when I can take the exam. Wow, this place is actually open on Saturdays and Sundays. I feel sorry for the people who work there. So I could take my exam in 2 days. If I go to this particular testing center, I could take on the 6th. Let's go ahead and do that. And that tells you, here are the various times that you can sign up to take the exam. All right, I'll do it at 10:15 in the morning. And that shows you what your order is. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop because if I proceed any further, I'll have to provide credit card details and things like that. But I think you get the idea. So this is the process that you would go through to go ahead and schedule your exam. And also if you have a voucher or something, you can put that in here as well when you proceed to checkout. So that is how you register for any of the Cisco certification exams, from the CCNA all the way up to the CCIE. The one exception to that would be if you actually get to the point where you're taking your CCIE lab exam. CCIE lab exams, they're not done at Pearson VUE. They're either done at Cisco's corporate headquarters, so you have to fly there and go into a special room at Cisco to do the lab, or Cisco also has these things called mobile labs that sort of travel around the country and travel across the world, and you can register for those, but that's not through Pearson VUE. But we're talking about CCNA, so I'm going to leave that topic behind. All right, so that talks about how many exams. Let's talk now a little bit about the testing experience. And the three things I'd like to cover here are what should I expect when walking into the testing center, what is the format of the test questions, and how well did I do? So let's talk about each one of those. So what to expect when walking into the testing center. All right, so you're gonna walk into this building, roughly 10, 15 minutes before your scheduled testing time. And first of all, you're gonna have to sign in. During the sign-in process, they wanna make sure that it's really you, that you're not taking your really smart friend who's pretending to be you, who's got a CCIE, and that guy's gonna take the CCNA for you and get the exam. They don't want that. So when you sign in, you have to provide 2 forms of identification. In my case, I provide my driver's license and a credit card with my name on it, and that was sufficient. And then you go ahead and sign in, and then they will give you basically a couple of things. They'll give you like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that's laminated and some dry erase markers. And you're going to take that in with you into the testing center. So if you need to take notes, if you want to write like a little brain dump, like an IP addressing cheat sheet or some memory aids, you can write it on that dry erase board. And they'll also give you a little eraser as well. So those are the 3 tools they'll give you: an eraser, some dry erase pens, and like an 8.5 by 11 laminated sheet of paper. And then they're going to ask you to basically relinquish anything that could possibly be used for cheating. So you're going to have to give up your watch. Yes, crazy as that seems. Your watch, your keys, your wallet, your cell phone. If you walked in there with a tablet, you got to give that to them. And they will put it in one of two places. In some testing centers I've been into, they actually have lockers, like in a locker room. And you put in a locker, and then you get to take the key with you. You lock it up and you take the key. I like that. That makes me feel very secure. There's been other testing centers I've been to where they basically, the person who's there, who's the admin of the center, basically just has a drawer in their desk. And they open up the drawer, they dump your stuff into a little cubby hole there in the drawer, they close the drawer, and they lock it, and they keep the key. But either way, be prepared that you're going to have to relinquish that stuff. So if you feel a little uncomfortable with that, you might want to leave that stuff back in your car. All right, so you might want to walk in there just with your keys, and that's it. Leave your wallet and your watch and your, baby pictures and everything back in the car if you feel a little uncomfortable giving that to a stranger who's going to lock that stuff away. No calculators. Want to make sure you're not under the misimpression that you can take calculators. You cannot take calculators into the exam. All you can take into the exam is your body and your clothes and your glasses, and that's it. Nothing else. Everything else you have to leave behind. Okay, then the test administrator is going to walk you into another room where there's going to be either a bunch of laptops or a bunch of really old PCs set up in little cubby spaces. And the testing administrator is going to sit down in front of one of those computers and it's going to log you in. They're going to be responsible for bringing up the correct test and everything. They're going to walk out. You're going to take your seat. Now at this point, the test has not officially started yet. Remember, all these Cisco certifications have a time limit. Once you start the test, you've got a certain amount of minutes before the test is over. At this point, that hasn't started yet. So when you sit down there in front of that computer, it's going to ask you, for example, do you want to see an example of what the questions look like? And it's going to show you the exact same thing I'm going to show you here in just 1 second, which is, what do the questions look like? So you can look at that, or you can just proceed directly on to the test. But once you press the start button for the test, that's when the test actually starts. And that's when the counter starts counting down. And there's no way to pause that, no way to stop it. So you might want to make sure, you do a bathroom break or something before you go into that room because you can't pause that timer. All right, so that's what's going to be like. And one other thing they give you, earplugs. I found that very, very useful because when I'm hearing people cry and scream in the cubes next to me because they're frustrated over, failing a test, it's kind of distracting for me. So I like to put in the earplugs so I don't hear the distractions of other people. So you'll just be sitting there doing your test, and then once you're done and you feel fairly confident that you're finished, you'll just press the end button and the test will be over. And then you will walk out, and they will give you a piece of paper that shows you how well you did. Now, what does that look like? So the test that you take, and I'm going to talk about this here in another section, is anywhere from about 50 to 70 questions, give or take. It's randomized. You never get the exact same questions twice if you go in there and take it a second or a third or a fourth time. And the questions are all broken down into different high-level categories. Depending on which test you take, for example, let me go back to this for a moment here. So if we take a look at, this is the ICND 1. So if I click on Review the Exam Topics, all the questions I'm going to get on the ICND 1 are going to fall into one of these 5 different categories right here. So when I am done and I get my test printout is going to show me each one of these categories and how well I did. It'll say, in network fundamentals, I got 99% correct. In LAN switching fundamentals, I got 18% correct. And so even though I won't necessarily be told which specific questions I got wrong, I will have an idea as to which major topics I did well in and which ones I didn't do so well in. And that's what you'll see. And of course, if you passed, they'll say, hey, congratulations, you passed, and now you'll actually have your official CCNA. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, the last thing in this particular section, is what do the test questions actually look like? What can you expect to see on that computer screen in front of you? So for that, I'm going to go back. Let's go ahead back to this page right here. And for this, you're going to want to click right here where it says review the type of exam questions. All right, so I'm going to click on that. All right, and just like it says right up here, in order to get this thing to play, you have to right-click and then select Play. So these are the types of questions you're going to see. The first type of question is multiple choice, single answer. Pretty simple. The next type of question you'll get will be multiple choice, multiple answer. And notice one nice thing is it actually does tell you how many answers are expected. Choose 3, choose 2. Now I would say probably 85% of all the questions you're going to get on the exam will be one of these two types: multiple choice, single answer, multiple choice, multiple answer. The next types of questions I'm going to show you here coming up, the remaining like 4 types of questions, fall into that 10 or 15% of the exam, but most of them are like this. So what can you expect to see of those remaining questions? Well, there's a couple of them. Let's go next here. There's the drag and drop, GUI-based question. You won't get too many of these. When I've taken the exams, and I take it, every year or so just to keep up to date on what's there, I'll see like 1 or maybe 2 of these drag and drop questions, so there's not a lot of these. Fill in the blank. I can't recall ever getting a fill in the blank question. I mean, clearly it's possible because it's written into the testing engine, but off my memory, I don't remember ever seeing a fill in the blank question, so you might not see any of those. Router simulation. This is the thing that scares people the most. So you can see up at the top, it will give you some objectives and it'll say this is what you need to do. And then down here on the left, it sort of walks you through how to work through the simulation. And you'll click on something, and now it's like you're actually getting into a router or a switch. So the router simulations are primarily used to test your knowledge of Cisco iOS commands. Do you know the command line language in routers and switches to get a particular feature or protocol working? That's the primary responsibility of the router simulations. And these can take a while. So the router simulations are one of the questions that take the longest to get through. But this really tests your ability to know the Cisco iOS command line. And it's because these questions exist that you will need to make sure that you spend time working in labs and actually working on real routers and switches before you approach your CCNA exam. Now, another type of question you might get is called the testlet. I don't like these. These seem kind of unfair to me because even though it's one question, it's actually 4 questions in one. So you can see here up at the top, you'll see what the situation is. And then right here, you'll be given a question to answer, and you'll answer the question right here, and then you go on to another one. So right here, you can see it's actually, in this particular case, 4 different multiple choice questions, all built into this single testlet. So on these things here, you are not actually configuring anything. It's really just a bunch of multiple choice questions rolled into one, but it's able to use graphics to test your ability to learn things. And then there's the simlet. Now, a simlet is similar to a router simulation. What's different? Well, first of all, in the simlet, just like in a router situation or simulation, you're going to click on something, and that's going to give you access to a router or switch. I should say a simulated, not a real router or switch, in which you can type in Cisco iOS commands. Here's the difference. The primary objective of a simlet is not to configure something. It's not to make something work or to fix something. The primary objective of a simlet, as you can see right here, is to answer a multiple choice question. And you can see, just like in the testlet, you have multiple choice questions within this one simlet. So what you're doing when you're getting into your router or switch, this is testing your ability to troubleshoot things or monitor things by issuing various show commands. Now, what do I mean by a show command? In Cisco iOS, in routers and switches, when you want to display something, like you want the router switch to give you some information. You want to see some statistics, you want to see some numbers, you want to see some tables, some, whatever. You're trying to, inform yourself about what this router switch is doing, what it knows. 99% of the time, you're going to issue a command that begins with the word show, like show running configuration, show IP address, show version. There's hundreds of commands that begin with the word show, and it's all for troubleshooting and monitoring purposes. So these simlets here, that's what they're testing you on. Do you know the appropriate show commands to gather the information so you can answer the multiple choice question? Now, the router simulations and the simlets here, you're not going to get a lot of these. Once again, it really depends on when you take it because it's always randomized. I've taken tests where I got just like one router simulation and one simlet, and that was it. Other times I've gone in there and I've gotten like 4 router simulations and like 3 simlets. That was like the worst I've ever seen. So you're not going to get like 15 or 20 of these and 15 or 20 router simulations. That's not going to happen. These questions are going to be very few in the total questions that you get. But these questions will burn up the most amount of time. It takes a lot longer to go through these than it does a simple multiple choice question. And that's it. Those are the types of questions that you will see when you're doing your CCNA exam. So that being the case, that brings us to the end of this particular section. Let's go ahead and take a look now in the YouTube screen and see if there are any questions that have not been answered yet that I can help you with. All right, so let me scroll up here and see what we've got. By the way, Happy New Year to everybody. Okay. Now, right now, I'm just scrolling through the questions looking for stuff that really pertains to this particular class and for people who are new to CCNA and new to CCNA routing and switching. So anything that falls outside of that scope, I will leave it to the rest of you guys to answer each other. One person here is asking what my Twitter address is. Let me go ahead and go back to that real quick and just post that on the screen so you can see. There you go. There's my information. So while you're writing that down, let's see here. Do I have any Udemy tutorials? No, I don't have any tutorials on Udemy. I have not gone to that. Somebody says they completed their CCNA routing and switching a few months ago. Any tips for CCNA security? Not really. There's a lot of overlap between the CCNA routing and switching and the CCNA security, but you're going to approach your CCNA security the exact same way that you're going to approach your CCNA routing and switching. You're studying techniques and everything, the amount of time it's going to take you, pretty much the same thing. You're going to use the same process. Somebody said that they've heard there's some extra minutes for non-English test takers. I don't believe so. I think your amount of time you're going to get is going to be the same regardless of what language you select. Someone asks how long it takes to study for the CCENT certification. The CCENT is the exact same thing as the ICND-1. So if I go back here to the website for a moment, let's put this back up. Once you pass this test, the 100-105, you will have your CCENT. And just to make sure that's correct, I'm like 99.9% certain that that is a true statement. I'm going to go ahead and right here click on CCENT Yeah, see, it's the exact same test, the 100-105. So once you get that, you've got your CCENT, and then once you get your ICND2, along with this, then you've got your CCNA. And like I said, this will take you anywhere from 2 to 4 months to study and prepare for this exam. All right, what other questions do we have? Someone asked where I'm from, right here in the good old USA. I'm actually doing this from North Carolina, so that's where this is, our studio is, I'm doing this from. Another good question, how do I get more and more practice questions to enforce my learning after reading books and watching videos? I will answer that. That's coming up in like 2 or 3 sections from now, so I'm going to hold off on that question, but I will answer that. I promise you it is coming up. Salim asked a good question. How do you relate the current CCNA exam syllabus with a real-world client scenario which is migrating towards more of the cloud? All right, well, depends on where you work. So, you know, what is the cloud? You know, for those of you who are watching who might not be familiar with that term at all. The cloud simply means basically the internet. In other words, let's say that in my company, I want to do email. I have some internal websites that I want my employees to be able to get to, like maybe my payroll website, my website that shows the daily cafeteria menu in my cafe. So I have some internal information that I want my employees to be able to get to. Well, I have a choice. I could either have the servers that have that stuff, my email server, my kitchen server, right on my premises, on my location within my company, or I could have the servers hosted by like Amazon or something, have them take care of the physical servers, and then my employees will have to go through the internet, through the cloud, to get to those servers. So if, either way, whether I am a network engineer who is working in the enterprise, in the actual company, right? The auto company or the auto parts store or the store that makes the toilets or whatever your company is. Or if I'm the network engineer working for Amazon and I'm working actually at the company that hosts all these servers that these various customers are getting to. Either way, you're still going to have routers, you're still going to have switches. That stuff isn't disappearing. I mean, though the routers and switches are the fundamental elements that compose a network. The cloud is just a different way of using the network. We still have the concept of, hey, within my company, I have a network that gets me to the cloud. If I don't have any routers and switches, if I don't have any cables, if I don't have any routing protocols, any switching protocols, I have no internet connection. So I still have to know routing and switching to get me to the internet and know how to configure and troubleshoot routing and switching if my internet connection fails. So I still need to know that even if all the stuff I'm using is in the cloud. And similarly, if I'm an engineer who's working for Amazon or for some of these other companies, if I'm working for a cloud hosting company, well, guess what? All those servers are connected to routers and switches. That's how we get access to the internet. That's how the whole world gets to us, is via the routers and switches we have to give cloud access to all of our customers. So either way you slice it, people are still going to need to know routing and switching. Until somebody comes up with a completely different idea behind routers and switches, that's still going to be necessary. It's still the fundamental mechanics of how a cloud comes to be in the first place. Am I planning to create flashcards or quiz for each video? Not at the moment. That is not in the immediate roadmap. I will talk about flashcards, though. That is coming up in a minute. Somebody says, I've completed the CCNA from our local country, but now I want to become an expert on it. I need your suggestions. Well, what I typically recommend to people is start with the CCNA routing and switching. That's sort of like the baseline or the foundational technology that everything else builds upon. And then your next step after that should be a CCNP in routing and switching. And that requires 3 exams. There's a CCNP route exam, CCNP switch exam, and a CCNP troubleshooting exam. Now, once you've gotten your CCNP certification, at that point, you have a choice. You could either continue going up the silo and now get a CCIE in routing and switching, and therefore you are now an expert in routing and switching. Or if you want to branch off into like wireless or security or data center, that would be a good time to do it. I would not typically recommend people to get their CCNA routing and switching and then branch off at that point. Once you've got your CCNA routing and switching, there's still a lot of stuff, foundational stuff, routing and switching stuff that you have not learned yet, that you really can only learn at the CCNP level. So get your CCNP, and at that point make the decision. Do I continue going and get my CCIE, or do now I branch off into a specialty somewhere? Let's see, I'll just take a couple more minutes here and then we'll keep going. All right, somebody says, I have 0 experience, 0 knowledge, and I'm 40 years old. Is it worth it to have a CCNA? Well, it depends on what your objectives are. So if you have 0 experience and 0 knowledge, that tells me you are not currently working in the networking industry or anything even close to the networking industry. So what I would advise that you do is, number 1, Google what the average pay rate is for people with CCNAs in your local country. For example, here in the United States, there's a lot of websites that you can Google to get what the pay rate is for a network administrator. Typically, if you have your CCNA, that's the job you're trying to get, is a job as a network administrator. And people with a CCNA trying to get a job as a network administrator in the United States, depending on what state you're in, what part of the country you're in, the low end is about $40,000 US per year, and the high end is about $65,000 US per year. So that's pretty much the starting salary in the United States for network admins, 40 to 65,000, just depending on what part of the state you live in or what part of the country. So you'll have to find out for yourself if you're in India or if you're in Russia or if you're in China, what is the starting salary for network admin, and does that make sense to you? You know, would you actually make a significantly more amount of money by moving into that role? Now, if the answer is yes, well then yeah, a CCNA makes total sense. A CCNA is the foundational certification you're going to need to move into that role. I'll answer one more question here, and then we need to keep moving. Yeah, we'll talk about doing practical lab practice on packet tracer and real devices. We'll talk a little bit about that. And last question here. Is there frame relay, BGP, and SDN on the ICND2 exam? Yes to 2 of those, but not 1. So there is no frame relay. So frame relay was removed from all the CCNA exams 2-3 years ago, so there's no longer any frame relay. But if you are pursuing your CCNP exam, there is frame relay on that. Now, I expect that when they come out with a new version of the CCNP, they will probably remove frame relay from it, but nobody knows when that's going to be. I would expect it'll probably be this year. The reason why I say that is that Cisco, when they put out a certification test, usually that test is good for somewhere between like 3 to 5 years before they update it. And when they do an update, that's when they put in new topics and they strip out old, irrelevant technology. And the CCNP exams, the last time they were updated was in 2014. So here we are in 2018, 4 years later. So I'm fully anticipating that sometime this year we'll get an announcement that the CCNP exam is being updated. Now the CCNA exam, the last time that was updated, I believe was in 2016. So I don't expect to see any updates to the CCNA for at least another couple of years. So at the CCNA level, there is no frame relay. There's a tiny little bit of BGP, very, very little BGP, but there's a little bit of that. As far as SDN, which is software-defined networking, there is a little bit on that. No configuration, no troubleshooting. This sort of wants you to know sort of the general high-level terms behind software-defined networking. Just a quick overview of that. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. So this next section we're going to talk about are the topics. In other words, how do you know what topics to study for the CCNA? How do you know what level of detail or depth you need to go into for those topics? Where do you get that information? So let's start out by talking about the first line of defense, or the first line of information, which would be the CCNA blueprints. So you'll hear that term a lot. If you haven't heard that, let's talk about what the CCNA blueprints are. So let's go back to our website here. Let's go back to the CCNA, routing and switching. And once again, let's say that you're going to start with the ICND1. Okay, so you're going to want to click right here where it says 100-105 ICND1. And all certification exams will have somewhere on the page where it says review the exam topics. So you want to click on that. Let me go ahead and expand this for you a little bit. And here it will give you the major sections for the exam. So for example, network fundamentals, you can see it's roughly 20% of all the questions fall into that category. Most of the questions fall into LAN switching fundamentals. And then you click right here where it says show details. So for this particular category, network fundamentals, these are the high-level topics that they will ask you about. And notice that these fall into sort of a couple of different categories here. When you see the words compare and contrast, or describe, or select, that's basically their way of saying, look, you don't have to know the commands to make this thing work. You don't have to know the commands to turn this on, to turn it off, to troubleshoot it. We just want you to know what it is. We want you to know the theory. We want you to know the terminology. We want you to know how it works. So that's what those things are talking about. Now, when they expect you to actually know a Cisco iOS command to do something, that's when you'll see, like down here, configure. So anytime you see the word configure, that means, okay, I need to know the iOS commands to make that thing happen. So you can see here in this one particular section under network fundamentals, most of it is not configuration. Most of it is just knowing of topics. But then, for example, when we get down to LAN switching fundamentals, now we see a lot more configure, right? Most 2.4, 2.5, and 2.7, most of that is configuration stuff. So this is where you're going to want to start from. This is where you will see what the overall topics are. Now, if you see something in this list, that means it is a candidate on the test. You might get a question on this on the test. Now, sometimes people will ask me, they'll say, okay, well, what if I don't see something on there? For example, what if I'm aware that this topic of LAN switching, there's something that falls under the umbrella of LAN switching, this feature or protocol I'm aware of, but it's not in this list. Is that something I need to know? Well, here's what I would say. Unfortunately, the reality is there is a possibility that you might get a question on something that does not fall within the blueprint. Doesn't happen very often, but it has been known to happen. Now, I don't know why Cisco does that. I can venture a guess though. When you first start the exam, when you're going through the sort of introductory screens before you've actually started the timer, one of the disclaimers they'll give you in print there is they'll say something along the lines of, some of the questions that you will see are experimental questions and do not apply to your grade. But you don't know which ones they are. So, maybe in your 90 minutes you get 61 questions, 3 or 4 of those questions might not apply to your score at all. Maybe Cisco put those in there because they thought, maybe we want to roll this topic into the new exam when the new exam comes out, and we just want to get a feel right now for, do people already know this? Is this something, is this question worded in a way that people will be able to answer it? For whatever reason, they've put that question in there and they just want to see how people do with it, but it doesn't actually apply to your grade. So my suspicion is when you get a question that falls outside the scope of the blueprint, it's probably one of those questions. But there's no way to know for sure. Unfortunately, there's no way to know as you're going through the questions which one of those are experimental questions and which ones actually apply to your grade. So that's what you're going to want to do. Number one is go to the blueprint here and expand the details on each one of these things and start studying on those. So that's your first line of defense. Next thing you're going to want to go to is the official Cisco Press books. Now there are a lot of publishers out there who have created books to help you prepare for your CCNA. Cisco Press, Cybex, lots of other ones as well. And a lot of times they'll get a very common question, which book is the best? Which book should I use to do my preparation? I typically guide people towards the official certification guides and the foundation learning guides that Cisco Press puts out. It's not necessarily because they are the best, most well-written books, but here's my line of thinking. Any book that was put out by Cisco Press, whether it was actually written by an actual Cisco employee as the author, which some of them are, or it was not, either way, Cisco Press means that book had to go through the editing process of Cisco. Cisco actually had to read it, edit it, and approve of it. So once that book is actually out, you know that it has officially been blessed by Cisco. If you're reading a book that's not a Cisco Press book, you don't know that. I mean, if I'm reading a book that's not Cisco Press, what assurances do I have that it's covering the topics I need to know? What assurances do I have that the topics that are in that book are of the appropriate and sufficient depth? I don't know. Cisco didn't take a look at it. Cisco didn't say it was good or not good. I'm just trusting the author that the author knew what they were doing when they wrote that book. Whereas a book from an official Cisco Press book had to get blessed by Cisco. It had to go through Cisco, through the editorial process, and that gives me a few more warm fuzzies that that book probably contains the appropriate topics and the appropriate depth. I have a little bit more certainty of that than when I'm not using an official Cisco Press book. So what do those look like? Here I'm going to do a plug for Safari Online Books. So if you go to Google and you type in Safari Books Online. Now certainly you can buy these books from like Amazon and stuff like that, but I love Safari Books Online because when you get a subscription to this, you've got access to thousands of books at any given time, and you can read them all online. So right now I'm logged into Safari, so this is a subscription-based thing. I'm not sure how much it costs, but you pay it per month or per year, and then you get access to all these books. So for example, if I was studying for the ICND 1, the 100-105, I would go into here and I would say 100-105. Now if I just hit and then Cisco, now if I just type that in, actually I recognize I was just on full screen there for a moment, so let me go back. I don't think I was showing it to you guys. So how I got here was I Googled, I went to Safari Books Online, and I signed in. If you don't have a subscription, clearly you'd have to purchase one first and then sign in. And then from right here, I typed in 100-105 Cisco. And this will show me all of their books. They even have videos in here that are specifically geared towards training on the ICND-1. So you can see here's a book from the publisher Infinite Skills. Here is Pearson Education. They came up with one. But the ones I recommend are the ones here by Cisco Press. And specifically, I would I would do 100 Cisco and then the word official. And there's two specific kinds of books that Cisco Press puts out that ideally you would study both of them. There's the official certification guides and there's the foundation learning guides. What's the difference between them? The foundation learning guides go into a little bit more detail on the technology, a little bit more depth. One thing they're lacking though are questions. The official certification guides have like chapter review questions. It's like tests built into the book, which I find to be a very useful thing. Another thing to notice here is that notice that there are, let me scroll down here a little bit. Where is it? Cert guide. Well, I'll just use up at the top here. When it comes to books, there is the official certification guide books, and there's also the official certification guidebook academic editions. And I always wondered, what's the difference between these? Not much. They both have the exact same content, very small differences. So the official certification guidebooks are developed for people who are doing their own self-study, whereas the academic editions are developed for like teachers and professors who are teaching networking and want to use this as their courseware, as the book for their students. Now, how does that actually play out as far as how the book is different? Like I said, they have the exact same material, the exact same level of depth, the exact same topics. The differences are very, very small. Number one, the colors. Some of the graphic colors are different between the two books. Who cares, right? Not a big deal. The other main difference is that in the official certification guides, at the beginning of every chapter, there's a test called a Do I Know This quiz. And you'll have anywhere from 6 to like 15 multiple choice questions to assess before you read the chapter how much you already know. In the academic edition, they made the decision that, hey, most professors, most teachers want to teach you the topic first and then give you an exam after you've done learning the topic. So in the academic edition, you won't find that quiz at the beginning of the chapter, you'll find it at the end, a review quiz at the end of the chapter. And the only other difference is that each chapter in the academic edition has a sort of chapter summary at the end, like a one-page chapter summary. You won't find that in the official certification guide. So basically, they're exactly the same thing. There's no reason for you to buy both books. Just pick one or the other. You don't have to get both. And then somewhere in here, hopefully there's a foundation learning guide. I'm not going to spend too much time looking for that. Actually, let's just see here. Let's just do a quick search. I know at the CCNP level, there's foundation learning guides. Foundation. Yeah, it looks like you really have to get up to the CCNP level and above before you get to the foundation learning guides. So at the CCNA level, the official certification guide, and you're good. And get an official certification guide for the ICND-1, and then look at the official certification guidebook for the ICND-2. Now, while I'm here, there's another good thing about this. This also leads me into my next question, which was, okay, now that I know what topics I need to learn because I looked at the blueprint and I saw the bullet points on there, now how do I answer the question, how much depth of each topic do I need to go into? Because if you Google, for example, if I pick a topic off the top of my head, for example, like spanning tree, okay, when you get to the ICND2 exam, that's a particular feature, protocol, spanning tree that you need to learn. But if you Google spanning tree, you will find some documents that go into really gory, nitty-gritty detail and depth on spanning tree. A lot of detail that you probably don't need to know in order to pass your CCNA. So how do you know? If you're studying for this, how do you know how much detail you need to get to? Well, once again, if I'm reading a topic here, for example, let's go into the official certification guide and let's pick a topic. There we go. Let's view the table of contents. Okay, so let's say that I looked at the blueprint and it talked about WANs, wide area networks, and said that I need to learn about leased lines. Okay, leased lines are one of those things that you get into real gory detail if you get way down into it. So I click on leased line WANs right here. And here we go. How much is there in leased line WANs? Well, there's a little bit right there. There's a little bit right there. Physical details of leased lines cabling. So whatever is in here, this is the level of detail you need to know. If it's in the book, that's the detail you need to know. That's how much detail you will be possibly tested on in the exam. If it's not in the book, I can say with pretty good certainty that you don't need to know it. Now, like I said, every once in a while you'll be given a question that's outside the scope of the book or outside the scope of the blueprint, but by and large, if you learn what's in these books, the topics here and the level of detail that's in here, you're good to go. You'll be ready. Now, let's say you say, you know what? I don't have a Safari online account and I don't have the money for it. I really only have the money to buy like one book, a real hardbound or softbound book. How do I pick one? All right, let me show you something else. Let's go to our good friend Amazon.com. Now you can certainly find in here Cisco CCNA in books. And let's narrow it down, 100-105. Okay, so here's the official certification guidebook. Hardcover is currently $21.20. Now here's other stuff too, right? Here's Todd Lamel's book. Here's one by Scott Empson. Here's another one from Wendell Odom, Paul Browning. So now we have the question of, okay, well, which of these are the best? Maybe you want to get like 2 books or 3 books. Which one to select from here? You're probably aware of this, but in the event that you're not, let me show you a real cool feature of Amazon, especially when it comes to books. A lot of the books here within Amazon, if you click on it, for example, let's do this one right here. What you want to look for is right here it has this look inside feature. If you've never seen this before, this is an absolutely awesome tool. So when you see a book that says look inside, you can click on that and it'll bring up a little sample of the book, several pages of it. And so you can just like go to a particular section. Now, I haven't even bought this thing. I'm just looking through. Let me scroll down here. So, and the reason I would look at this, what is this stuff? Copyright material. I'm not sure what all this is. I'm looking for an actual like page. Numeric reference tables, appendix. Let's go back up to here. Okay, so here I can see this book has a Do I Know This quiz, so I like that. So if I'm considering a book that's not Cisco Press, I might say, hey, it's got quizzes in it. That's good, I like that. And I can start reading a little bit about this. Perspectives on networking, blah, blah, blah. And as I'm reading this, I might think to myself, hey, you know what? I don't like this. The author's not very clear to me. The graphics they use are kind of hard to understand. So now I don't have to waste my time buying this book because I've read a snapshot of it and I don't like it. Or vice versa. You might read it and you might say, hey, you know what? This looks good. the author speaks to me. I can really understand his or her analogies and examples and stuff. So I would definitely recommend before you buy any book on Amazon that you find the ones that have this look inside feature and just spend a few minutes looking at some sample pages and reading through them to see if it just speaks to you. And then the last thing. So once again, we're going back here now to the question of what topics do I need to know and how much depth do I need to know in that topic. And we started out with the blueprints. Then we went to the Cisco Press official certification guidebooks. Last place I would recommend is, of course, our videos, our INE CCNA videos. So let me show you how to find those. Now, even if you're not an INE customer, you can still preview the topics of the videos that we have and how many videos we have and how long each video is without actually buying them. There's a very easy way to do that. So from your website here, just type in streaming.ine.com. Let me expand that a little bit more. Oops. Come on, get down there. There we go. So streaming.ine.com. No membership required to see that. And then once you're here, you would click on Cisco. You would click on CCNA, routing and switching. Now, here at INE, you've got a couple of options as far as viewing our videos. One thing you could do is to purchase what's called an all access pass. And in the event that you're not familiar with that, let me just briefly describe what that is. An all access pass is exactly like what it sounds. It's a subscription. You can get like a 1 year, a 2 year subscription. Sometimes we have subscriptions that are of shorter durations. But basically when you get an all access pass subscription, you literally have access to all of our videos. And we have thousands of videos, not just on CCNA, but all kinds of topics. And you can browse through all of them right here to see what we have. So that's an all access pass. And so when you have an all access pass, you'll have access to, at the CCNA level, we've got some recorded kickoff sessions like the one we're doing right now that are in here. We've got technology videos. We have videos that are very specific on certain features like spanning tree, OSPF, EIGRP. So all of this stuff is available under the All Access Pass. Now, alternatively, you can purchase like packages of just specific videos. For example, if I go to ine.com just to show you and click on the little shopping cart right here, continue browsing, Cisco, scroll down, routing and switching, scroll down, and associate level. You can see here, for example, you could purchase the entire CCNA technology series of videos for $120. Here's some other ones for $79. So these are our individual packages of specific videos. Now let me go back to streaming for just a second. Cisco, CCNA, routing and switching. Okay, so with this, you've got a couple of choices. So right now, today, I've been focusing on the IC&D 1. So if you clicked on this one right here, this is a series of videos that's specifically tailored towards people who are pursuing their IC&D 1 certification. So if you click on that, see a brief description, you can see it's about 22.5 hours of videos. And you can see what the topics are. Now at this point, this is as far as you can go. If you haven't purchased the videos, if you're not an All Access Pass member, you can't click on any of the videos and play them. But at least you can get to this level to see what the topics are of the videos and how long each video is. And when I created this video series right here, I specifically did it in mind with what topics do people need to know and how much level of detail do they need to know to pass their ICND-1 exam. And there's also another set of videos for the ICND-2. There's another set of videos that's both. If you're taking the composite exam, that's the ICND-1 and ICND-2 all wrapped up together. So I would definitely recommend that you follow that approach. Start with the blueprints, read in the Cisco official press books, and supplement your reading by watching videos as well. So that answers the questions of what topics do I need to study and how much depth do I need to study to get into those. So with that, let's go back to YouTube for a moment and see if there are any unanswered questions. Salim is saying, is it mandatory to have knowledge on proxy, engineer, and firewall related terms as CCNA certified? Not if you're going for your CCNA routing and switching. CCNA routing and switching doesn't really touch on firewalls. They expect you to know what that term is, what is a firewall, but that's it. So none of the stuff that you've typed right there are really relevant for the CCNA routing and switching. Let's see. Kane, you have a very good question. Kane is basically asking questions saying that they got the CCNA routing and switching back in January of 2015. And by the way, the CCNA is good for 2 years. After 2 years, it expires. So before the 2 years is up, you have to retake your CCNA again, or some higher level exam to recertify it and keep it active. Now, Kane, in your example, it looks like yours is going to be expiring any day now, since it's actually it's 3 years. So yeah, it's expired at this point. And you're wondering, can you take your CCNP or CCNA security even if your CCNA routing and switching has expired this month? So it is true that some of the higher level Cisco certifications have as a prerequisite a lower level exam. For example, let's go back to here again. And let's go back to exams. No, that's not what I want. What I'm looking for is the CCNP exams. I want to show you where it mentions prerequisites for these things. Here we go. All right, so professional. CCNP, routing and switching. Okay, so for prerequisite, you can see here it says valid CCNA routing and switching certification or any CCIE certification. Honestly, I don't know what they do as far as a check for this. And for those of you who are watching YouTube, if you have an answer for this, I would love to know it. My suspicion would be that if your CCNA has expired, at that point, it's like you don't have a CCNA anymore. You don't have a valid CCNA in routing and switching, and therefore you can't take these exams because it's expired. And so my suspicion would be it would not let you register, because when you go into Pearson VUE and you register, Pearson VUE already knows what your Cisco ID is. It already automatically knows what Cisco certifications you have that are active. And so it should do a check, and it'll recognize that you don't have an active CCNA, and it shouldn't let you even register for a CCNP. So my suspicion would be no, that if your CCNA has expired, you won't be able to do any of the other exams that have a prerequisite of a CCNA. If anybody knows differently, please let me know. And yeah, Billy, you're right. So I was thinking CCIE. So the CCIE expires after 2 years. The lower level certifications expire after 3 years. So you get a little bit more time with the NA. You got 3 years to recertify. It's the IE that you only get 2 years to recertify on that. Someone's asking, is it possible to complete the CCNA in 3 months with no prior knowledge in networking? It's certainly possible. It just depends on how much time and effort you had to put into it and how good you are at memorizing things. But I would definitely say it's possible. Well, hold on a second. I was thinking ICND 1. It's certainly possible to get the ICND 1. Is it possible to get both, the ICND 1 and the ICND 2? I'd say it's possible, but it's unlikely. If you were somebody that did not have a day job, if you were somebody that could actually afford to study for like 8 or 9 hours a day, every day, and not only do studying, but do practice on equipment and stuff like that, then yeah, theoretically, you could get both exams done in 3 months. It will not be easy, but it is possible. But for most people that actually have a working day job, probably not. Probably not going to be able to get that done within three months. All right, let me scroll through some of the questions here, see if there's anything else. Question, is there a roadmap between the official certification books and my videos? For example, chapter 3 in the book is in video 8. Not really. So the short answer is no, there's not. So what you really need to do is, I'd recommend reading the chapter in the book first, and then going through the video topics and look for a title of a video that lines up with what you just read. It's not in any particular order that matches up with the book. Will there be IPv6 on the ICND 1 exam? This is a perfect example of where I would say, okay, well, to answer that question, I would go to the book, 100-105, official, and then I would go into the book, and then once in the book, under table of contents, I would simply scroll down to the index. You could scroll through all the very different chapters and stuff here, but just to go really fast, I'm going to go down to the index at the bottom of the book, right there, index, and let's go to the eyes. All right, IPv6 hosts, host IPv, okay, this is the H's here, but yeah, just the fact that it says IPv6 host tells me that clearly there is something in here about IPv6. Okay, so you can see, yes, short answer is yes, there's IPv6 addressing. They want you to know a little bit about IPv6 DHCP, but clearly there is stuff about IPv6 within the ICND 1 exam. All right, let me just answer a few more questions here. I see you guys are doing a great job of answering each other's questions, so I really appreciate that. Hey, Jamie, I see your comment there that you passed your CCNA earlier this year. Fantastic. Congratulations on that. I don't know anything about our CCNA data center stuff. I'm just focusing on routing and switching here at INE, so I don't know what the plans are for CCNA data center. You'd have to ask sales about that one. Somebody asked a question, what are my views on learning a scripting language like Python for networking? So once again, if I'm assuming that the main audience for this session are people who are thinking of pursuing their CCNA or just having started CCNA, don't worry about scripting languages at that level. Don't worry about that. My recommendation would be get your CCNA routing and switching, then focus on getting your CCNP routing and switching. Once you've got those two certifications, then you can branch off. And branching off might mean doing some scripting. Now, certainly, a lot of network engineers need to know scripting. Python in particular is a very useful scripting language. Now, some of you guys watching might be wondering, what the heck is he talking about scripting? What does that mean? Let me give you a brief example. In a lot of companies, you as a network engineer might need to log into multiple different devices. Maybe a couple of times a week, you have to log into like 30 different devices, 30 different routers, 30 different switches, and apply the exact same commands over and over and over again. Maybe twice a week, you need to log into devices and issue a bunch of show commands to see what the health is of that router switch, to see what the tables look like. Well, a scripting language can automate that for you. If you know scripting like Python, you can create a Python script on like your laptop that with just the press of a button will automatically for you log into each device one at a time, send that device the command that you would normally type in, collect the information back, and your script could even then be automated to parse through the output of that command and look for specific things that you're looking for and then show that to you on your screen. And it could all be automated. So scripting is certainly, especially in network environments that have a lot of devices, a very useful skill, but I would not really recommend focusing on scripting until you've at least got your CCNP. Then that's probably the appropriate time to start thinking about that. And I can see that Justin, you basically said the same thing, so that's good, thank you. And by the way, Ahmad, 40 years old is definitely not too old to learn Cisco, not too old to pursue your CCNA. I've heard of people in their 50s and 60s getting their CCNA who want a career change. It's never too old to learn something new. Never too old to keep your brain engaged and to challenge it by learning something new. Don't worry about that. Age is not a factor. I mean, you would never know that I'm 19 years old by looking at me, but here I am. So just keep that in mind. Let's see here. So Vladi, you say that you're a CCNT, but your cert is from July of 2016. Do you need to retake it and then take ICND2 to become CCNA? No, you don't need to retake it. So that ICND1, that CCNT, should be good for 3 years. So it should be good until 2019. So as long as you take your ICND2 while your ICND1 is still active, you're okay. You should not have to retake that exam. Okay. And once again, a couple more people have asked about the cloud. Like I mentioned, it really depends on what your role is within a company. The cloud is composed of a network of routers and switches and servers. Your company has a network of routers and switches that connects to the cloud. So somebody has to monitor and configure and troubleshoot those routers and switches. If those routers and switches don't exist, you don't have a network. If you don't have a network, you can't connect to the internet, you can't connect to the cloud. So somebody still needs to understand routing and switching in order to have that foundation there in place. Alexi, I'm not going to answer your question. All right, so that being the case, I'll just let you guess. See if you can guess my age, see how accurate you are. Whoever guesses correctly gets a free bottle of water. So I'll tell you what, we've been going for about an hour and a half at this point. I don't know about you, but I need a quick break. So let's take like a 10 or 15 minute break, and then we will resume after that. So I will see you guys in about 15 minutes.
You know, I think that when I first started that there was, you know, I had a perception that I knew a lot about the core protocols. And now, you know, I realized I didn't when I first started. And this has really filled in those gaps. Just getting in there, labbing the stuff, seeing the problems, correcting the problems.
I've never seen anything out there like this. And I've been to multiple Cisco courses for my CCNP, CCNA. But this, you actually get to see the technology work. So it kind of helps stick it in your brain.
Our sessions are very interactive, always available to answer any questions during the session or offline.
They give you, he gives you the right mentality you need to approach any problem or troubleshoot or, you know, answer a question on a test.
It's helped me a lot, you know, even stuff that's not even for the CCIE, you know. I had the all access pass, just the knowledge that you get from them, you know, not only like, you know, this is how you configure it, but they actually show you in the video, this is how it works. And that's what you need. You can't just read a document and be like, well, this is the configuration. So hopefully it works, because sometimes it doesn't work.
I wish that I'd start off with material just like this, because I would have understood right off the bat what the theory is and what it's actually doing in the command line.
It's definitely more advanced. I think it's explained in a better way, better analogies. I think it's tougher, which is good. You know, I took one that was earlier and it was easier, you know what I mean? So it gave me this false confidence. And so now getting into this stuff and you see like, wow, this is a little bit more advanced. So, I want to do some more of this stuff, and now I'm starting to feel way more comfortable.
Few of the weak spots that I had, I'm able to get over those things and understand those things better.
It's easy to study for a test and just study exactly what you need to know, but in this class we've gone kind of above and beyond, and he showed us things that can actually apply in real world, and some things that may not be applicable to the exam, but are good things to know, especially when troubleshooting. And
I definitely recommend it. I've been recommending it. Just using the materials, now going to the camp, I'd recommend it all day long. It's a completely different learning experience.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a nice break. So in this next section, I want to talk a little bit about study tips. How can you make the most effective and efficient use of your study time, and what tools are available to you? So starting out with videos, books, and online documents. We've pretty much already talked about this. I've talked pretty extensively about videos and books. Just this last section here about online documents. Now, if you are anything like me, I learn best when I learn about something from multiple different sources. Just reading about a topic in one chapter of one book doesn't really make it sink in for me. I have to read about it in like several different books. I have to Google it. I have to try it out myself if I can on real equipment. So with online documents, I would just recommend, for example, once again, let's say you're talking about spanning tree, okay, an ICND2 topic. So you've read about spanning tree in the ICND2 official certification guidebook. You've watched my video on spanning tree. One additional thing I'd recommend is just, once again, use our good friend here of Google. And I would just type in Cisco CCNA spanning tree. I would definitely preface it with Cisco CCNA because hopefully that will filter out those things that go into more detail than you really need to know. And I would look on here. All right, so here's a link from Cisco, Understanding Configuring Spanning Tree. But what I really look for are sites that are designed for CCNA. For example, here's a free CCNAstudyguide.com. Here's CCNA training, spanning tree tutorial. Maybe just spend a little bit of time looking on these CCNA specific websites and read a little bit more about that same protocol that you already read about in the official certification guidebook and you watched in the videos, just to supplement what you've already learned about. Number 2, utilize many practice exams. There are lots of different places you can go to get practice exams. Let me start by showing you what we here at INE have to offer. So let me make this expand a little bit here so you can see this. So now I'm going to go ahead and log into the INE members dashboard. And once again, you don't need to pay anything to have an INE account. You would just, so for example, if you just go to INE.com and click on login right here, if you don't have a username and password, it'll prompt you to create one. It's free. And then once you've created one, you'll get access to what this is called as the members dashboard. And from here, you can see the upcoming courses that we'll have on a calendar. But specifically what I'm going to go to is All Access Pass. Now, if you have an All Access Pass, you will see everything available to you in here. But I'm going to go to Cisco, CCNA, Routing and Switching. And you'll see in here, if I scroll down a little bit, right here we have a CCNA Routing and Switching practice exam. And I believe, although it's not showing up here, let me just look at something real quickly here. If you want to search for something particular, you can click in the search field here. Let's just search for practice. Courses. Videos, CCNP route, CCNP switch. All right, well, let's just take a look at the CCNA routing and switching practice exam. If I click on that, and so this is designed to, as closely as possible without actually using Cisco's testing engine, to replicate what you would see in the actual environment. So here you'll be given 60 multiple choice questions, which is about the exact same amount that you'll get when you actually take the real exams. You'll be given 90 minutes, so 1 hour and 30 minutes. That's also the exact same time frame you will have to complete your exams, ICND 1 and ICND 2. They give you 90 minutes to complete. And so if I click on Begin Practice Exam Attempt, it loads the exam. It should come up here momentarily. And begin. And so here, just like in the real one, if there's more than one correct answer, it'll say how many answers you need to select. Select 2 answers. All right, so let's just see here. I'm just going to randomly select 2 of these things. I'm not even going to bother reading them. So that one and that one. Submit. Select 2 answers here. All right, let's just do that and that. I'll just do one more. Okay. All right, and let's do this one right here. Submit. Now let's say that, and notice here up at the top, it does show you, just like the real exam, how many minutes you have remaining before it expires. Now, unlike the real exam, this one here, you can actually pause it. So if you need to step away for a moment to use the restroom or to eat lunch, you could pause it and then resume. So that's a nice feature that's built into this. But let's say I say, you know what, I'm done. I don't have time to do the entire thing. I can end it wherever I happen to be and submit for grading. And this will show you, okay, so this one here with the green check mark, I got that one right. Oh, I got 1 and 2 wrong. So if I click on number 2, it'll show me, okay, so these are the ones I selected. However, these were the correct answers. And many of these, not all of them, but many of them have what's called a video solution walkthrough. So you can play the video solution and you'll see me talking about the question. I'll explain the question and then I'll explain why the answer was the correct answer. So definitely you can do that. There are also other practice exams available to you. You know, the Cisco official books have practice exams within them. If you go to Cisco's website, you can purchase practice exams from them. Cisco CCNA practice exam. So right here, you want to take a look at this one. This is one that you can purchase from Cisco's official website, and there are many, many, many other ones that you have access to. So I would definitely recommend that you utilize as many practice exams as you can possibly get your hands on. Now the next thing, I'm a huge proponent of flashcards. So now once again, there are flashcards that you can buy that are pre-made, but I think you really will learn the topics better if you create your own flashcards. So for example, get yourself some note cards like this. These are, I think, are 2x3 note cards, but get yourself some note cards and then just on one side of the note card, write yourself a question, and on the other side of the note card, write your answer. And then just frequently refer to these things. Keep these things in the car next to you. So when you get to a red light, you can quickly whip out a question and look at the answer. Take it with you to lunch. You know, when you're home for the evening, say, hey, you know, honey, hey, wife, hey, husband, can you quiz me on some of these things? So now there's also a lot of websites you can go to. For example, one website you can go to where you can create online note cards is called Study Blue. There are other ones. So if you go to Study Blue, you can create for free, no payment required. You can create your own note cards, your own flashcards, I should say. Personally, though, I prefer having real flashcards because this website, I can't take that with me into the bathroom. I can take these. I can't take that with me into the car when I'm driving. I can take these. Can't hand that website over to my girlfriend or my wife or my son and have them quiz me. I can do it with these. So it's just your own personal preference, but I prefer to create real flashcards and just quiz yourself over and over and over again with those. Number 4, study with a group if possible. So there's a lot of study groups out there. Some benefits with study groups is you want to have a study group where you have the ability to interact with those people as much as possible. Now, of course, there's a lot of online forums where you can submit questions and get answers, and that's all well and good, but I wouldn't consider that to be a study group. To me, an effective study group is something, for example, where we say, okay, we all agree that between now and next Thursday, we're going to read Chapter 5 on spanning tree in the official certification guidebook. And then we're going to get together next Thursday and we're going to talk about it. In addition to that, if I was a study group leader, I would say, in addition to that, I want each of you people in the study group to come up with 2 multiple choice questions on Chapter 5. And when we get together again next Thursday, let's submit your questions to the group, and everybody gets to read everybody else's questions and take a stab at answering it. And if you disagree with the answer, we can talk about it. If you got stumped, we can talk about it. Another great way a study group could be is the best way I have ever found of learning something is if you're forced to teach it to somebody else. So for example, if I was a study group leader, I would say, okay, and next Thursday, John, I want you to do a 10-minute presentation on something related to spanning tree. The following Thursday, we're going to be talking about VLAN trunks and VTP. So Sally, you're going to have a 10 or 15-minute presentation I want you to give to the group on that topic. So by preparing a presentation, that will help you also. And there's a lot, but you get the idea here. The idea is everybody should be engaged. You should be challenging each other, teaching each other stuff, and use that as a resource to motivate you. You should be held accountable in the study group. If you're just some silent observer in a study group, it's very easy to just drop off and nobody will ever know that you were ever even there. But if you make the members of the study group accountable by telling them, you guys need to create quiz questions that you're going to share with everybody. You guys need to do presentations that you're going to do in front of everybody. Every single week, I expect everybody to submit like 3 resources that they found. I want you to submit a website, 2 websites on spanning tree and a video on spanning tree that you found online. Make everybody in the group accountable. That will keep you engaged. That will keep you involved. So if you can't find a group like that, make one. Make one yourself. Now, I have not Googled it, but I'm sure there are plenty of resources out there that are available to make study groups and to invite people into your study groups. So I would recommend that. Also, refer back to old topics often. What do I mean by that? So these Cisco official certification guidebooks are massively big. I mean, if you were actually to buy one, it would be like 600 pages long. And it'd be very, very easy. You're 2 months into it, you're studying chapter number 12 to completely have forgotten what you learned about in chapter 1 and chapter 4. That's where your flashcards come into play. So as I actually create my flashcards, I put the exam number in the corner and the chapter, and then I create my question. And I'm going to divide this into chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So go back to your older flashcards frequently. I would recommend that, for example, let's say I was dedicating 3 hours a day during the weekdays to do my studying. So from 7 to 10 p.m. After I get home at night, after I eat dinner, from 7 to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, I'm studying for my CCNA. Well, I would create a schedule for myself. I would do something like, okay, from 7 to 7:30, I'm going to whip out my flashcards and I'm going to test myself. And I'm going to make sure that in that half an hour, at least 10 minutes of it is studying the older stuff that I haven't read in quite some time. And maybe the other 20 minutes is studying what I just read yesterday in my chapter. And then for an hour, I'm going to read. And for the next hour, I'm going to try to do some labs and practice what I read. And I'm going to go back to my flashcards. And I'm going to create some more flashcards. But go back to the old topics frequently so you don't lose that, so you don't forget about them. Frequent lab practice. So this is another thing that you want to do. Now remember, when you're taking your CCNA, all right, what's the ultimate objective here? Well, you're taking your CCNA probably because of one of two things. Either you want to move into the field of being a network administrator, you actually want to get a job working on this stuff, or you already have a job working on this stuff and you want a promotion, or you want some new opportunities to come your way. So ultimately, your objective is you want to be able to tell somebody, hey, I have a CCNA, which means I can do things. I can actually get on equipment and configure things, troubleshoot things, monitor things. A CCNA is no good to a potential employer if all you can do is recite facts. Oh yeah, I can tell you how spanning tree works. I can tell you what the IP protocol number is for OSPF. I can tell you what the TCP port number is for BGP. What good is that going to do an employer? An employer wants to know that you actually know the Cisco iOS commands to make that stuff work, to troubleshoot that stuff, to get it functional. And so the CCNA, a lot of the questions are going to be based on iOS commands, not just the router simulations. Certainly the simulations and the testlets and the simlets, those are all based on knowing iOS commands. But even a lot of the multiple choice questions, you'll get a multiple choice question. They'll say, okay, of the answers below, what is the correct command to meet this objective? And it'll show you like 5 iOS commands and you'll have to pick the one that's right. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is you need to know the iOS commands to get stuff done. And the best way to do that is to actually get on equipment and practice it. So that brings us to our next topic. How do you do that? So when you're talking about equipment, getting on equipment, there are basically 3 ways that you could do it. So number 1 is real equipment. Please forgive my handwriting. I know it's not the best. Real equipment. So let's talk about that for a second. There are definitely some benefits and some drawbacks to purchasing your own routers and switches, to setting up your own home lab and practicing. What are the benefits? You know it's always available, right? You have control over it. 24/7, it's available to you. What are some of the other benefits? There's certain things that you can only learn if you're physically in front of a device. For example, knowing what the LEDs are. You know, when does this LED turn red? When does it turn green? When does it turn orange? What does that mean? When I plug something in, how does it change the lights? What does it actually look and feel like to plug in a cable? What does it feel like if it's not plugged in quite all the way? What if a pin is broken or bent on a cable? How is that going to affect things? You know, when I turn a device on or turn it off, what actually happens? What sounds do I hear? How much heat is generated from this device? That's something you need to know to actually work in a real networking environment. All sorts of things you can only learn if you're physically in front of a device. Doing password recovery. If I have a router or switch and I've forgotten the password, there's a process called the password recovery process that requires you to be physically in front of the device to do it. You can't do it if you're not right there in front of the router or switch. So there's a variety of things that are beneficial to having routers and switches right there in your home in front of you. Now, there are also some drawbacks. Number 1, it's not free. You're going to have to spend some money to buy those routers and switches. Although these days, routers and switches that you would get to practice for your CCNA, you can get those pretty cheaply. Electricity costs. When you've got your lab running, it is sucking electricity out of your electric bill. So you can expect that your electric bill in your house or in your apartment will increase when you've got those routers and switches turned on. Heat. These routers and switches generate a lot of heat. So especially if you're doing this in the summertime, be prepared. That room you're in is going to get real hot. You're going to get real sweaty. And so you're going to want to crank up the AC, which once again, that's going to increase your electric bill. So be aware of that. You know, from a safety perspective, if you've got little kids, you know, in your house or your apartment there, you don't necessarily want to build a big old stack of routers and switches that could topple over on your son or daughter and break their leg or break their arm. So be aware of that as well. So there are some downsides to that as well. So, but real equipment, if that is something you want to do, I would say a minimum lab for that would be 2 routers and 2 multi-layer switches. That's why I put by ML here, multi-layer switches. A multi-layer switch is basically a switch that could do both switching and routing. For example, the ones that we have here in our racks are 3560s. I would recommend those or 3750s. Those are the brands, those are the models, and you can get those from eBay or something super, super cheap. You can probably get those for like $100 each, maybe even a little bit less. And routers. The routers I recommend are the ISR routers. Okay, and there's a whole variety of routers that Cisco sells that fall within the category of ISR routers. Those you can get really cheaply. So if you have a lab of just 2 routers and 2 switches at minimum, you should be able to do pretty much everything you would want to do for CCNA. Now, if you want any more detail on that, I would recommend that you go to our video series. Let's go back to here, streaming.ine.com. If you type in here, home lab, you'll see there is a video series here called Building Home Labs that I did. Go back to this. Effective techniques for building home labs. Sorry, I was on full screen there, so let me go back. So how I got there was streaming.ine.com. In the search field, I typed in home lab. I clicked on Building Home Labs. And then up here, I clicked on this button right here, which takes you to the beginning of that series. And you can see I've got 2 hours and 40 minutes of a whole video series on exactly how to do that. What equipment to buy, where to find it, how to design and implement it, how to use it to the most effective use. So there's a whole series on that. All right, now you don't have to do that though. The second option you would have is to, so option number 2 is to use simulators or emulators. What do I mean by that? So there are several companies out there that sell or even give away software that emulates Cisco routers and switches, so that right on your laptop you could do a lab and not actually have physical equipment in front of you. Your laptop will emulate the routers or switches. And there are 3 flavors of this that you will hear most often. There is GNS 3, there is Packet Tracer, and there is Cisco's Viral. So let me talk a little bit about each one of these and what they are. So starting with GNS3. So GNS3 is free. You can just go to gns3.com and download the GNS3 software. Now GNS3 is what they call an emulator, not a simulator. What's the difference? So what GNS3 does is GNS3 works in partnership with a real Cisco iOS software. So GNS3 does not work in isolation. GNS3 is like a container or wrapper that you plug software into. So the same iOS software that would run on a real Cisco router, you would have to find that. And I'm not going to talk right now about how you would find that, but you'd have to, be a Cisco customer and download the software or find it elsewhere. But you'd want to download the software to your laptop. Then you'd want to download GNS3, and then once you open up GNS3, you point it to that software. And then what GNS3 does is it basically tricks or fools the software. The software thinks it's running on a real Cisco router when in reality it's using the processor and memory of your laptop, not a real Cisco router. And GNS3 is the software that does that emulates the router. And once you've got GNS3 running, you can build topologies right within your laptop to do your work. Now there's pros and cons to GNS3. Clearly the pro is the GNS3 software itself is free. A pro is that once you've got the software as well as the Cisco iOS software, you've got everything you need. You don't even need internet connectivity. You could be out on a beach somewhere. You could be in a coffee shop. You could be in a library. You could be at a concert. As long as you've got your laptop, you don't need any connection to the internet. You can do it all independently right on your laptop. The downside is it does require real iOS software, so you'll have to somehow find that. It does consume significant resources on your laptop. But then again, for CCNA, having like 2 routers and 3 switches is really all you need. So building a topology of like 5 or 6 devices, you can probably do that on most laptops. It will consume virtually all of your memory, but it will work. But if you need to create topologies that are bigger than that, that starts having a problem because your laptop might not have enough CPU resources or memory to create really large topologies. So that's GNS3. Let's talk now about Packet Tracer. So Packet Tracer is a simulator. This is built by Cisco. This is Cisco's tool. And Packet Tracer is also free. So if you Google Cisco Packet Tracer download, you can find sites where you can register for Cisco's Network Academy. You don't actually have to go anywhere or do any of their classes, but once you register for that, you can download Packet Tracer for free. Now, what do I mean by Packet Tracer is a simulator? So Packet Tracer is a self-contained program, okay? You don't need to have any internet connectivity when you're running it. You don't need to have any Cisco iOS software. Packet Tracer is a standalone software package that's built to allow you to create your own topologies of routers and switches and all kinds of stuff. And it's supposed to look and feel like real Cisco iOS, but it's not. It's not real Cisco iOS. So here's the pros and cons to Packet Tracer. The pro, it's free. Once you're using it, you don't need an internet connection. There's lots of things you can do with Packet Tracer that you can't do with GNS3. You can pull in servers, you can pull in clients, you can create topologies that have IP phones in them, all kinds of fancy stuff. The main con with Packet Tracer is that because it's not real Cisco iOS, there are certain commands and features that the CCNA will expect you to know that are not supported in Packet Tracer. For example, I've mentioned spanning tree several times. You can configure spanning tree and you can play around with it in Packet Tracer, but it's very limited. Some of the spanning tree commands that you would need to know for the CCNA are just not available to you within Packet Tracer. So that's a downside to it. And then the last one I want to talk about is VIRAL, which stands for Cisco's Virtual Internet Routing Lab, VIRAL. Now, VIRAL is not free. You have to pay to get a subscription to it. I think it's something like a couple of $100, and for $200 you get like a 1-year subscription to it. And with Cisco's VIRAL, you have to have an internet connection. It only works there. And you use the internet to connect to these virtual routers and switches that they are hosting on their servers. Now, for those of you who are preparing for your CCNA, quite honestly, I would steer you away from VIRAL. I think VIRAL is far too complex to get working, to get running, to get started, and I just don't think you need to use it for CCNA. Now, once you get above that to like CCNP and CCIE, then yeah, you probably want to look at VIRAL. But for CCNA candidates, I would actually probably say go with Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer is probably, of these three, what I would suggest as the preferred software to use when studying for your CCNA. GNS3 is great, but once again, you got to have real Cisco iOS to go with it. Packet Tracer, I think, of these three would be the best solution if you want to use simulators or emulators. So what's my third option? So option number 1 was to buy your real equipment, have your own lab. Option number 2 was to use a simulator or an emulator software. Option number 3 is rent time on real remote equipment. In other words, you're going to use your internet connection from your house or from your office or from the coffee shop, wherever you happen to be, and you're going to log in to real routers and switches that somebody is renting to you on like an hourly basis. I think this is probably the best of all worlds because you get access to real Cisco routers and switches. You don't have to worry about, okay, is the software going to be missing certain commands I need to know? Well, if it's simulated software like Packet Tracer, yeah, it might be missing those commands. Even with GNS3 and Viral, it's great for router stuff if you're practicing commands you do on routers, but it falls very, very short when you're talking about switches. So your LAN switching stuff, your best option to learn your LAN switching stuff is either to have real equipment that you bought or to log in and rent time on remote equipment, remote switches that somebody else provides for you. And of course, here at INE, we offer that as a resource. So let me show you. Once you log into the INE members dashboard, you will see that one of your options is right here in the upper right corner, rack rentals. Okay. So you will want to click on that. And you can see we have all sorts of racks available for rent. What I'm going to focus in on are the CCNA and CCNP routing and switching racks. Okay? So if you rent time on these racks, you get 4 routers and you get 3 real switches that you can practice things on. Now these racks, as you can see, cost 3 tokens per hour. What is a token? Well, token is something you purchase in advance. So for example, purchase tokens. You can see here there are list price for tokens. You can get as few as 100 tokens for $100, or you can go upwards from there. INE frequently has sales and specials on tokens, so if we don't have a sale right now, just wait, and we probably will have a sale. But let's say you purchased the minimum quantity. You purchased 100 tokens. All right, well, then you can see here, 100 tokens will get you roughly 33 hours of rack time on this particular rack right here, which is quite a bit. And so, once I've got my tokens, I would click on schedule. And I could say, all right, well, let's see here. I want to have this rack available to me for 4 hours on Saturday. So Saturday is going to be the 6th. And I'm going to want to start at 12 o'clock noon. All right, done. And I want to end on the 6th at 4 p.m. Done. All right, is that going to be available to me? Let's check it out. Search. It says right here, yep, that 4-hour time slot is available. If I book right now, it will consume 12 of my tokens, and I'll have that available to me. And I can cancel it. As long as I cancel it before that time actually starts, I can cancel it and get my tokens back if something else comes up that I'm not aware of. And then once you rent the time on the rack, you'll get access to the rack, and you can actually either create your own labs, or if you prefer, you can go through some pre-built labs, which we have available as workbooks. And you can see here within CCNA, we have a CCNA ICND1 workbook. We currently do not have an ICND2 workbook, but we do have an ICND1 workbook. And through the ICND1 workbook, for example, if I click on port security, it'll show you here is the task for port security. It says, okay, here's the lab you're going to build. And it actually tells you, here's what you want to do. Configure this stuff based on these requirements right here. And then click this to see if you did it right. It shows you the commands to type, what to look for verification. So if you like to go through labs that other people, for example, that we at I&E have created, these workbooks are great resources to do that. But I also recommend that you create your own labs, that as you go through videos, as you go through books, that you think to yourself, okay, what's the minimum quantity of equipment I would need to make this thing work that I'm reading about? If I'm talking about a routing protocol, maybe I need 2 routers at minimum with 1 cable between them. So I draw myself a little picture on a piece of paper. I start drawing arrows. I want this router to talk to this guy and send this information. I want this guy to talk here and send this information. And then make it work. Rent some time on some equipment and make that happen. So definitely you want to have some frequent lab practice to drill those iOS commands into your brain. And then also get familiar with Wireshark. Wireshark is a free software you can download. Just go to wireshark.org. Let me show you where that is. Wireshark.org. So you can download Wireshark software, and then when you turn it on, I'll just show you quickly what Wireshark looks like. It will show you everything that your computer sees, all of the information that's coming in and going out of the network. So here's what Wireshark looks like. Let me expand this a little bit. Once I've downloaded it, as you can see here, this shows me all of my different network adapters. And right here you can see that my Wi-Fi adapter is really the only one that's seeing anything. These other adapters aren't connected to anything. So I could select my Wi-Fi adapter, just click it here, double click it, and it starts showing me all of the stuff that my Wi-Fi adapter is seeing. It's capturing those frames. Now I can stop it, and I can click on any one of these things. For example, this one right here, what is this? Okay, well, once I'm learning about Ethernet, when I'm reading about Ethernet in the book, now I can see, oh, this is what an Ethernet frame looks like. I've learned what a destination MAC address looks like. I've learned what a source MAC address is. Now I can actually look at that in here. Once I learn about what IP version 4 is, now I can actually see it with my own eyes. Oh, here's an IP packet. And I can see all the different fields within the IP packet and click on them and see what they look like. You know, reading about something in a book is one thing, but actually getting real experience with it and seeing it with your own eyeballs, that's a whole other story. And Wireshark gives you that ability to do that. So that sort of wraps up there all the tools and tricks I would suggest that you use when you're studying. So let's take a moment now to go back to the Q&A and see if there's any questions I can answer for you. All right, so let me start from the bottom this time and work my way up a little bit. Okay, so Hunter's asking a question to everybody else. I'll let you guys weigh in on that. Well, I can tell you our CCNA is not $899. I don't believe it costs that much. Let me see, our CCNA is a lot cheaper than that. Let me see what you're referring to. So, ine.com, I'm going to bring this up right here. And training solutions. Maybe you're talking about one of these training bundles here. Let's take a look. Cisco, routing and switching, associate level. All right, so you're talking about the complete bundle. That's what you're referring to. Let's take a look at it. So this has got Python programming. This has got a lot of stuff above. So this has got videos on Wireshark. You get some rack rental tokens, so that's definitely useful. You get some videos here on beginning the Cisco journey. You get all of our CCNA videos, some special videos that go into a lot more detail on IP addressing, access lists. You get the workbook, and you get 250 rack rental tokens. So now that we know that the CCNA racks are 3 tokens per hour, so what is that roughly equal to? That's about, what, 81, 82 hours of practice? That's pretty good right there. I can't answer for you if that's worth it or not. You'd have to answer that for yourself. But it's definitely nice to get some rack rental tokens in addition to all the videos, as well as getting the workbook itself. I'll let other people weigh in on if they think that's a good value or not. What other questions do we have here? Another question, how much in advance should I book a rental equipment? And do I need an all-access pass to have a workbook or rent equipment and get the workbook? You definitely do not need an all-access pass to rent time on our equipment. As long as you have a free I&E membership, as long as you've created a login account for yourself, you can purchase rack rental tokens without purchasing anything else. So you don't have to purchase our videos, you don't have to purchase an all-access pass to get the rack rentals. All you have to do is purchase tokens and then go onto our system there and rent time for yourself. So that's completely independent, completely separate from the all-access pass. Also, as far as the workbooks are concerned, you can purchase the workbooks as standalone items. You can purchase them as part of CCNA bundles, or they certainly also come with the all-access pass. So if you want the workbooks, you have those 3 options. Purchase them by themselves, get a CCNA bundle, or get the all-access pass. Now, as far as how far in advance you should get time, well, once again, if you think back to the blueprint, right? Let's just focus in on the ICND-1 blueprint. So remember, with the ICND-1, there were the things that you did not need to know to there was the configure items, and then there was the describe, contrast, compare things. So only when it says configure do you actually need to practice something. So what I would recommend doing is, let's go back here. Let's go back to Cisco CCNA. Let's click on routing and switching. Let's just focus in on the ICND-1 for now. Review the exam topics. So you can see here under Network Fundamentals, configure, verify, and troubleshoot IPv4 addressing and subnetting. Quite frankly, you can do that on your laptop. You don't need to rent time on equipment to do that. Configure, verify, and troubleshoot IPv6 addressing. I would recommend reading about this stuff here first before you even consider doing anything on a router switch. So I would say just read and watch videos to do your network fundamental stuff. Do practice exams on that, create flashcards on that. It's really not till you get to LAN switching. Once you get to section 2.4 and above that you will actually be spending any time on equipment. So I would say go through the videos, go through the books, and once you've studied and done some practice exams and done some flashcards up to and including 2.5, once you've gotten to that point, then you should feel safe spending, 2 or 3 hours on a rack rental to practice some of this stuff. And there's something else I want to look at. let's see, all access pass. I'll have to come back to that in a little bit. All right, what other questions do we have? We already talked about that. Multi-area OSPF, yes. Multi-area OSPF is part of the ICND2 exam, so you will need to know about that. All right, what else do we have here? Okay, it looks like a lot of you guys have answered each other's questions. Okay, it looks like most of you guys have already had your questions answered by other people. And yes, the all access pass gives you access to all of this stuff. So when you go to streaming.ine.com, if you have an all access pass, you literally will have access to our VMware classes, our CompTIA, our Juniper, our Wireshark, and everything. So you can see here, we've got just a ton of stuff. Much of this is only available if you have an all access pass. All right, the next thing I want to go into our next short topic is what I call personal observations, which is, what have I seen, what have I experienced when I took the CCNA? Just real quickly here, go over some of this stuff. All right, so quantity of questions. This depends on whether you take the ICND1, ICND2, or you take the composite exam. So if we go back to Cisco's website for a moment, right here, you'll see that for the ICND1, it says it is 90 minutes in duration, and you should expect to get somewhere between 45 and 55 questions. Similarly for the ICND2, if I click on that, right here, ICND2, come on. Once again, 90 minutes, 45 to 55 questions. Now, if you take the composite exam, which pulls questions from both the ICND1 and the ICND2, that is this one right here, the 200-125 exam. That is still 90 minutes, but that's a little bit more. That is 60 to 70 questions. And so that goes right in line with what I did. The last time I took it, I got 64 questions. So I took the composite exam and I got 64 questions in those 90 minutes. Scoring, a perfect score is 1,000. You have to get at least 810 to pass. So just be aware of that. Now sometimes people will ask me, they'll say, okay, well, how is the scoring actually done? For example, how many points is given to a multiple choice, multiple answer question? How many points is given to a simulation question? You don't know? and Cisco won't tell you. That is super secret, confidential information that even most Cisco employees don't know. And how do I know that? Well, because I worked at Cisco. I worked at Cisco for 17 years before I came here at I&E. And during all that time at Cisco, even I didn't know how the scoring was done. Very few people, even within Cisco's corporation, know the details of that. That is super secret. If somebody tells you, hey, I can tell you the answer to that question, I would ask them, how do you know? Because even most Cisco employees don't know. So there's just no way to know how the breakdown of the scoring works between the multiple choice, the simulations. That's a very closely guarded secret. Once again, as far as the simulations are concerned, I can just tell you that the last time I took the composite exam, I only got one simulation, that was it, and I got one testlet, and that was it. On other times, I've gotten as many as 4 simulations and like 3 testlets. So it'll be somewhere in that range. And the last thing I want to talk about in this section is what I call a brain dump in your car. What is that? All right. So, like I mentioned, when you are sitting in front of that computer and you are going through the exam, you're going to be hit with questions and you're going to know right off the bat, I don't know this. I either completely forgot about this or I didn't study this, but you're going to have those questions that are like, oh my gosh, I know I'm going to have to guess on this. I don't know the answer to this. Here's what I'd recommend. You're going to have that little 8.5 by 11 laminated piece of paper there in front of you and your dry erase marker. Reserve some space on that for those types of questions. In other words, maybe you're hit up with a question on BGP TCP port number. You say, I have no idea. Write that down. Write on your laminated piece of paper. BGP TCP port number. Below that, extended access list. Below that, IPv6 neighbor discovery. So as you're going through your questions and you're getting those questions that you know you're going to have to guess on, write that down on your laminated sheet of paper. Then, after you're finished with the exam and you press submit, spend a few minutes memorizing what you just wrote down. Stare at that thing, memorize it. Now, you walk out to your car. You're feeling a little bit bummed out because you didn't pass. Here's what I mean by a brain dump in your car. Sit down in your car, close the door, but before you start that engine, before you drive away from that testing center, bring up your smartphone, bring up your tablet, whatever you have, and press the record button. Sit back and record your own voice. Start recording yourself saying, okay, there was a question in there on OSPF areas. I had to guess on that. There was a question on there on spanning tree, what the default Spanish bridge priority was. I had to guess on that. There was a question there on the BGP TCP port number. I didn't remember what it was. I had to guess on that. And so record your voice doing this, because I'm telling you, when you walk out of the testing center, that will be the time when it's most fresh in your brain what you did not do well on. Those things you had to guess on, those things you did not know. And you want to sit down in your car there and do a brain dump and verbally talk it through with your eyes closed and record that before you drive off. Because if you wait until you get back to the office or until you get back home, you will have forgotten some of that stuff and it will be gone. It will be lost. Now, once you've done that brain dump, then stop the recording, then drive home, drive back to your office. And then when it's convenient to you, play that recording back and start making an outline of it. Start typing into Microsoft Word or Notepad or whatever it is that you use, all the things that you recorded, and now you will have created a study guide for yourself of those items that you did not do very well on the exam. But you definitely want to create that verbal study guide before you leave the testing center while it's still fresh in your mind. All right, let's go back and see if we have any questions that I haven't answered yet. Is there a private lesson with me on I&E? Well, kind of. There kind of is. Let me point out to you, we do offer here at I&E, we offer boot camps. And I am the instructor of the Routing and Switching CCNA boot camp and of the Routing and Switching CCNP boot camps. Let me just show, in case you weren't aware that we do that. If you go to INE.com, notice here under boot camps, you can select that. CCNA boot camps. So you can see we've got a CCNA routing and switching boot camp right here. And you can click on that, and you can see when the dates and times are. So the next one coming up is February 19th. That will be here. Most of them are here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And you can see the other ones here. We do have an online one. Actually, February, that one's going to be online. So that will be an online boot camp. You don't have to leave the comfort of your home or office, but you could register for that. Or you can come here to Raleigh, and that's a 5-day class. It's very intense. It's about 9 hours a day, 9 or 10 hours a day for 5 days straight. You know, there is a lunch break, of course, but that is a boot camp that I hold. And then I also hold CCNP boot camps as well once you get beyond your CCNA. So those are as close as you're going to get to a private class with Keith Bogart. So I am the instructor for those. Should you anticipate trick questions on the exams? Well, I wouldn't say that Cisco intentionally tries to trick you, but unfortunately, some of the questions are not worded very well. And I don't know if that's because they have non-English speakers who write some of the questions, but some of the questions, unfortunately, are kind of poorly written, and sometimes you're not quite sure what the objective is of the question or which answer is the correct answer. It's an unfortunate fact, but some of the questions you will not like because just the way they were worded. Nothing you can really do about that. Yeah, Justin's got a very good point there. Some of the questions you'll be looking at and you'll say, well, answer A could technically be correct and answer C could also be technically correct, but they're only asking me to select one. So just like Justin says, you'll have to ask yourself between A and C, which one is more correct than the other? And that's how you'll have to answer that. I do not offer any exercises on GNS3 or Packet Tracer. The lab workbooks that we have created that are available to you are based off of the assumption that you're renting time on our racks to accomplish those labs. All right, so I have one more section I want to talk about here, which is common pitfalls. So in this section, I want to talk about what are some unfortunate negative things that happen that derail people. When they're going through the studying process, they will make the studying take longer than it should or causes them to miss critical things. So let's talk about it. And I've got basically 4 points I want to cover. So number 1, failing to adhere or create a dedicated schedule. So what's this talking about? So you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to start studying for the CCNA. And yeah, studying 2 or 3 hours a day sounds good. And so you wake up Monday morning and you say, today, I'm going to study for my CCNA at lunchtime. Or today, after work, I'm going to study for my CCNA. But you don't put it on your calendar. You don't put it on your phone. You don't create an alarm for yourself. And guess what? By the time this week is over, you look back at this week and you say, oh, I forgot to study for my CCNA this week. So you definitely want to make it a dedicated time to study for your CCNA. So here's what I would recommend. If possible, on your calendar, it should be something like you do regularly, like exercise. You could say, okay, every single day from 3 o'clock until 4:30, I'm going to study for my exam, and I'm going to put it on my calendar. I'm not going to accept any meetings during that time. I'm not going to accept any conference calls. If my wife or husband needs me to help around the house, I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, but I can't do it between 3 and 4:30, whatever that time is. Put it on a calendar, put it on your wall, put it as part of your tablet. Make sure that's dedicated time that every single day you set aside for studying. If you just say, well, I'm going to get to it at some point, that point will never happen. Make it something that you do as regularly as eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you don't, you will find that days and months slip by and you did not study. Number 2, becoming overwhelmed at the sheer quantity of material that you need to know for the CCNA. So first of all, I'd recommend focus just on what you're learning today. Don't look at the size of the book. Don't look at the size of the table of contents or the index. Just read and create flashcards on what you're learning today. Don't be overwhelmed at the sheer quantity of material. There is a lot of stuff, but if you get overwhelmed at the forest, you'll never get through the individual trees in that forest. So I would say, number 1, concentrate on what you're learning today. Use flashcards to help you remember what you studied yesterday, and create your own labs. You know, as you're doing a lab, try to make your labs be more and more complicated. In other words, the very first lab that you do might just be putting an IP address on a router's interface to see if you know the command and bringing that interface up. The next lab might be pinging between those 2 routers and changing that IP address. The next lab after that might be setting an IP address on 2 or 3 router interfaces and turning on a routing protocol. Make your labs progressively more and more difficult that incorporate more and more of the older things that you learned. Not learning IP addressing and subnetting very well. So this is another common pitfall. You want to make sure that when you go into the CCNA exam, you have IP addressing and subnetting down cold. In other words, let me give you an example. If I was to bring up this, if I was to say 101.13.32.0/19, and if I was to ask you, is that a host address, a network address, or a broadcast address? You should be able to answer that question in less than 20 seconds. That's how well you should know IP addressing and subnetting. You should be able to look at that and say, okay, based on the /19, that is a network address. Okay. So if I say, if I give you another one like this, if I gave you that, and if I was to ask you, what is the broadcast address that that host lives in? What's the broadcast address for that host? Once again, within 30 seconds or less, you should be able to answer that question. That's what I mean by knowing IP addressing and subnetting really well. And the last thing, neglecting the trivial points. What do I mean by that? A lot of people, as they're reading through these books, the books will mention a timer. They'll say, this thing happens after 30 seconds. And they'll read it, they'll say, okay, interesting, and they'll move on. The book will say, this is the TCP port number for that protocol. This is the quantity of time that this happens. So in other words, little facts, little details. And as you're reading through the books, you'll say, oh, okay, that's interesting, good to know. And you'll move on. And you'll forget to create a flashcard on that. And then guess what? People go and they take their CCNA and they fail it because they forgot those little things. They never bothered to memorize what they consider to be trivial points. Now, it's true. Once you become an actual network engineer, once you become an actual network administrator, do you have to memorize the EIGRP hello time? Do you have to actually memorize what the UDP port number is for DNS? No, You can look that up in Google in 30 seconds or less. But for the purposes of the CCNA, they want you to have that stuff memorized. Those little points about numbers and timers and variables, you will want to create flashcards on that stuff and memorize it. Otherwise, you will fail the exam. All right, that wraps it up. Let me see if we have any last questions or Q&A that I can help you guys with. What is the best lab simulator software to use? At the CCNA level, I recommend Packet Tracer. I recommend Packet Tracer for that. And Justin has a good point. Learning subnetting for the first time is a pain. It is. But eventually you have that moment when it just clicks, when we just get it. Let's see here. What other questions do you have? The CCNA will not change this year. They just changed it back in 2016, I believe. So I would not expect the CCNA exams to change anytime before 2019 or 2020. So you should be fine for this year and probably for most of next year as well. Do I plan on having a boot camp in Europe? Not that I'm aware of. If that's something that you would like, I'd recommend calling sales and talking to them about it. But they have not booked me for Europe right now. Yep, and Cisco definitely does focus on memorization for passing. Is IPv4 going away for good anytime soon? No, not anytime soon. Although IPv6 is becoming more and more important, and you definitely want to learn IPv6, Cisco is putting more and more IPv6 into their exams. So they're definitely pushing you to learn more about IPv6, even if you don't actually use it in your network. But IPv4 will definitely still be very predominant, I would say, for at least the next 15 years. At least the next 15 years, IPv4 will still be a very important and predominant protocol. Thank you, Celine. Happy New Year to you as well. So I don't see a whole lot of other questions coming in at this point. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you very much for watching today. I hope this was a useful and beneficial program. And like I said, this is something we have every single month. So if you have a friend or a relative or a coworker who missed today's show and is considering pursuing their CCNA certification, have them tune in February. We will have another one of these scheduled for February as well. And like I said, you've got my contact information there. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. And other than that, I'll go ahead and leave the streaming up for a few more minutes so you can submit your questions. But thank you for watching, and I hope this was useful to you. Good luck on your CCNA certification pursuits. data networks. That consists of about 3 hours of videos that fall under that general umbrella. So ideally, you would watch those 3 hours before attending our boot camp, or get a similar level of knowledge via your own self-studies of reading, white papers, or wherever you go to do your self-studies. So with that, hopefully I've answered your questions, I've whetted your appetite to attend our boot camp, and I will see you there.